Nancy Guthrie was somebody's mother, somebody's grandmother, somebody's best friend. On the night of January 31st, she had dinner with her family, laughed, and went home. She never called, she never texted, she never came back. 54 days later, her medication still sits untouched on her kitchen counter, and her family is still waiting. 54 days, no answers, no Nancy. While investigators comb through thousands of tips and a single doorbell camera video, one question keeps the family awake at night, and one phone call may hold the answer to all of it. When FBI analysts polled Nancy Guthrie's final phone records and isolated the very last communication she ever made as a free woman, one of them stopped typing. 54 days into the search, the missing piece might be sitting in a suspect's pocket right now. What that call revealed didn't just redirect the investigation, it pointed straight at someone nobody wanted to believe. But before we get into what investigators found, you need to understand something most people covering this case have completely overlooked. Nancy Guthrie did not vanish into thin air. She vanished from a specific timeline, one that begins with a perfectly ordinary Saturday evening and ends with 4 hours of total silence that nobody can explain. On Saturday, January 31st, 2026, Nancy called an Uber at 5:32 in the evening from her home in the Catalina Foothills neighborhood of Tucson, Arizona. She was headed to her eldest daughter Annie's house, just 4 miles away, for a family dinner and game night. Nothing felt off, nothing looked wrong. By all accounts, it was the kind of evening families repeat 100 times without thinking twice. For the first time, the sheriff's department outlined a rough timeline. After dinner at her daughter's house, Nancy was brought home by a family member at 9:48 p.m. At 9:50, her garage door closed. Then, at 1:47 in the morning, the doorbell camera disconnected. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos later confirmed to the New York Times that Nancy was dropped off and that her companion made sure she got inside safely before driving away. Surveillance data locks it to the minute. The garage door opened at 9:48 and closed at 9:50. Nancy was inside. Then, nothing. Here's the catch. There is a 4-hour gap between the moment that garage door closed and the first sign that anything had gone wrong. At 1:47 in the morning, Nancy's Google Nest doorbell camera was disconnected. At 2:12 a.m., the motion system picked up a figure near the home. At 2:28 a.m., her pacemaker stopped transmitting to the monitoring app on her phone. Her phone was found inside the house the next day, so was her wallet, her car keys, and her daily heart medication. She never called anyone after she got home. She never texted. She never reached out for help. Whatever happened inside that house during those 4 hours, Nancy Guthrie faced it completely alone. And by 2:28 in the morning, even her heart had gone quiet. Now here is where it gets strange. Officials told NBC News they believed Nancy's pacemaker disconnected from its monitoring application around 2 a.m., which could help pinpoint the exact moment she left her home. Nancy is 84 years old. She has limited mobility and requires critical daily medication. The last communication on Nancy's phone, the final call that FBI analysts zeroed in on, didn't come from a stranger. It led back to someone who had been in that house for dinner just hours before she disappeared. And what that phone record revealed about the timeline between that call and the moment the pacemaker went dark set the entire investigation on fire. The internet had already made up its mind before the first week was out. Within days of Nancy's disappearance, one name was everywhere. Social media exploded with theories, accusations, and outright fabrications, moving faster than any fact checker could catch them. But here's the part nobody talks about. The actual picture of this man's life looked nothing like what the online mob was building. Tommaso Tioni, Nancy's son-in-law, married to her eldest daughter Annie since September 2006, He had lived in Tucson ever since. For over 15 years, he taught AP Biology and 6th grade science at Basis Oro Valley. Outside the classroom, he played electric bass in a local post-punk band, wrote poetry in Italian, studied lizards, and made homemade pasta from scratch. Annie celebrated their 10th anniversary on Facebook, calling Tommaso the most beautiful, intelligent, sensitive, talented, and hilarious person she had ever known. Family friend Zach Lind publicly stated that Annie and Tommy are amazing people and dedicated parents who love and care for Nancy on a daily basis. On Christmas Day 2025, just weeks before Nancy vanished, Nancy posted a family photo showing everyone in matching pajamas. Tommaso was standing right beside her holding the family dog. She was beaming. And get this, it was Tommaso who drove Nancy home that night. He was the last confirmed person to see her alive. He knew the layout of the house, he knew where the cameras were, and the phone record that FBI analysts had been staring at pointed directly at the gap between his departure and the moment everything went wrong. None of that stopped the accusations. Journalist Ashley Banfield reported on her podcast that a trusted law enforcement source had identified Tioni as the prime suspect. When challenged on Dan Abrams' Sirius XM show, Banfield doubled down, claiming things had really tightened up inside the sheriff's department following her report. She added a line that stuck: "When they take shots at you, you are standing on the target." FBI agents were seen at Annie and Tommaso's home on February 7th for approximately 3 hours, camera flashes visible from inside, deputies emerging in blue gloves carrying evidence bags. Annie's car was impounded. Unverified claims about $50 million in gambling debts owed to a Mexican casino spread like wildfire before being completely debunked by multiple reputable outlets. The damage was done. Then on February 16th, Sheriff Nanos stood in front of cameras and issued a definitive statement. The Guthrie family, including all siblings and their spouses, had been cleared as possible suspects. He called the accusations not only wrong, but cruel. He confirmed the family had been ruled out within the first few days and had been fully cooperative throughout. Cleared on paper. But the phone record that started this whole chain of suspicion still sat in evidence. And the crime scene it pointed back to told a story of its own. One involving mistakes so serious that even the investigators themselves eventually had to answer for them. This is the part nobody talks about. The Nancy Guthrie investigation didn't just face an unknown suspect and a cold trail. In the very first week, it nearly destroyed itself. When Pima County Sheriff's deputies arrived at Nancy's home on February 2nd, the scene was immediately alarming. Blood droplets on the front porch were later confirmed through DNA testing to be Nancy's. Her phone and wallet sat untouched inside. There were signs of forced entry, small glass fragments near the front entrance, and the doorbell camera appeared to have been deliberately tampered with. Sheriff Nanos stated bluntly that she did not walk away, that investigators believed she had been forced to leave that residence against her will. The FBI joined almost immediately. At its peak, the operation deployed around 400 investigators around the clock. The case generated over 50,000 tips. But behind the scenes, critical errors were already compounding. The crime scene was released prematurely. Nanos admitted it himself. Investigators had to return days later to recover evidence they had missed on the first pass. A roof-mounted camera was completely overlooked during the initial walkthrough, and the doorbell camera footage was initially declared unrecoverable because Nancy didn't have a paid Nest subscription, only for the FBI to later pull images from residual back-end data that should have been pursued on day one. It got worse. The county's high-tech search aircraft pilot had been disciplined following a dispute with Nanos and reassigned to street patrol before this case even happened. The department's most experienced search and rescue deputy had also been transferred to patrol in late 2025, without a replacement. Two of the people most qualified to assist in exactly this kind of search were simply not there. And get this, more than 20 people were detained and released over the course of the investigation. Carlos Palazuelos was stopped during a traffic check 60 miles south of Tucson and released the next day, telling reporters he hoped they found the real suspect because he was not it. Luke Anthony Daly was pulled from a residence 2 miles from Nancy's home during a full SWAT operation alongside his 77-year-old mother, held for hours, then released. His attorney confirmed no link to the case whatsoever. Dominic Evans, an elementary school teacher who played drums in Tommaso's band, was targeted by online theorists who claimed his build matched a figure in the doorbell footage. He told the New York Times he felt like someone had taken his name for clickbait and entertainment while innocent people got hurt. Meanwhile, the actual suspect remained a grainy silhouette. The FBI released 4 black and white images. A male, approximately 5'9" to 5'10", average build, ski mask, gloves, carrying a distinctive black Ozark Trail backpack sold exclusively at Walmart, and wearing a visible gun holster. Whoever he was, he had done his homework. He knew about the cameras. He came prepared for exactly this kind of night. But here's where it gets strange. The ransom note he left behind, sent not by mail, not by phone, but by email, contained details so specific that even hardened FBI veterans said they had rarely seen anything like it. And the detail that shook them most was directly tied to Nancy's last phone call. $6 million in Bitcoin and a deadline that changed everything. The ransom demands didn't come through traditional channels. They came through email sent to CBS Tucson affiliate KOLD-TV, a second Tucson station, and TMZ, spaced roughly 12 hours apart, each one escalating, each one revealing more than it should have known. TMZ founder Harvey Levin provided the most detailed public account. Visibly unsettled as he described it on air, Levin said the letter laid out precisely what the kidnappers wanted, what the consequences would be if those demands weren't met, and how the deadlines were structured around escalating consequences. The note demanded $6 million in Bitcoin, included a verified Bitcoin wallet address, and set 2 separate deadlines. The first, 5 p.m. on Thursday, February 5th. The second, 5 p.m. on Monday, February 9th, tied to a consequence described only as more serious. Here's the catch. What made that note genuinely terrifying wasn't the dollar amount. It was what the author knew. The note contained details that had never been made public: the location of Nancy's Apple Watch, information about a floodlight at the property, and a precise description of what Nancy had been wearing the night she disappeared. The grammar was perfect, structured, layered. A retired FBI agent reviewing it noticed something else. The author used the abbreviation USD for dollars, a term Americans almost never use in casual communication. That either meant the writer was foreign-born, or it was deliberate misdirection from someone sophisticated enough to think about linguistic fingerprints. Around February 18th, TMZ received a second ransom email, more graphic, more chilling than the first. It demanded payment in a highly sophisticated cryptocurrency, not Bitcoin, used a different account, and cited media coverage of the case as a direct trigger for the escalated demands. Whoever wrote it had been watching the news, adjusting, responding. And get this, a separate series of emails arrived from someone claiming not to be the kidnapper, but to have information about the kidnapper, offering it for 1 Bitcoin, roughly $70,000. TMZ confirmed the tone was clearly different, almost certainly not the same person who wrote the original notes. Then there was the fake ransom. Derek Kella, a 42-year-old man from Hawthorne, California, was arrested after texting Annie Guthrie and Tommaso Tioni directly. "Did you get the Bitcoin? We are waiting on our end for the transaction." The FBI traced it back to his Gmail account. He was charged with transmitting a ransom demand in interstate commerce. He had nothing to do with the actual kidnapping. He had simply seen an opening. Both real deadlines passed. No confirmed payment, no further contact from the actual kidnappers. CNN analyst John Miller sat with that silence and offered the most haunting explanation yet. This may have begun as a planned home invasion that went completely sideways and was re-engineered into a kidnap for ransom scenario because the suspect's options had suddenly narrowed to nothing. The ransom notes were digital, no handwriting to analyze, no paper to trace. But there was a glove. One black glove found in an open field 2 miles from Nancy's home. And what the FBI found inside it was about to fracture the forensic investigation in a way nobody expected. If this case gets solved, it will almost certainly come down to what is sitting in a laboratory right now. And here's the part nobody talks about. The forensic evidence in the Nancy Guthrie case has been simultaneously the most promising lead and the single most frustrating aspect of the entire investigation. Blood on the front porch was confirmed through DNA testing to belong to Nancy Guthrie. Violence happened at that home. That much is not in question. During searches of the surrounding area, investigators recovered approximately 16 gloves in total. Most belonged to volunteers who had discarded them during the search. But one black glove found roughly 2 miles from Nancy's home appeared to match what the masked suspect had been wearing in the doorbell footage. The FBI extracted a DNA profile from that glove. Unknown male. No match in CODIS, the FBI's national DNA database containing roughly 22 million samples. The suspect had never been arrested for a qualifying felony. But here is where it gets deeply unsettling. The DNA from the glove did not match the unknown DNA recovered from Nancy's property. 2 different samples, 2 different profiles. That raises a chilling possibility that more than one person was involved in whatever happened inside that house. Inside Nancy's home, the picture grew even more complicated. Most DNA recovered traced back to people with legitimate reasons to have been there: family members, landscapers, service workers. But several samples contained mixed genetic material from multiple individuals, creating processing difficulties that standard lab techniques couldn't untangle. The samples were sent to a private lab in Florida rather than the FBI's facility at Quantico. Former Chief Deputy Richard Castigard didn't mince words. All the evidence should have gone to Quantico from the beginning, he said. The decision to route it elsewhere was a mistake. Forensic science professor April Stonehouse at Arizona State University described what she saw with the kind of quiet precision that makes investigators lose sleep. The sample, she explained, likely contained approximately 90% of Nancy's own genetic material and only about 10% from a potential suspect. Separating a signal that faint from that much noise isn't just difficult, it's the kind of ratio that defines whether a case gets solved or goes cold. And get this, C.C. Moore, chief genetic genealogist at Parabon Nanolabs, offered a thread of hope. Even if standard DNA profiling fails on that 10%, the same sample might still yield a profile suitable for investigative genetic genealogy, the same technique that cracked the Golden State Killer case after decades of dead ends. Forensic scientist Peter Valentine of the University of New Haven pushed even further. If multiple people entered that home to take Nancy, there must be physical evidence of their presence beyond DNA, hair, fibers, trace materials that don't degrade the same way biological samples do. The labs, he said, need to look beyond the obvious. Here's the catch. While those samples sit in a Florida facility being analyzed and reanalyzed, the clock keeps moving. 54 days in, The masked figure in the Walmart backpack hasn't been identified. The phone record that started all of this still hasn't yielded a public answer. And the one person in this story who felt that absence most acutely was about to speak in a way that stopped the entire country cold. Savannah Guthrie had spent her entire career on the other side of this kind of story. Every morning, millions of Americans turned on the television and watched her deliver news about other people's worst days. But on February 4th, 2026, she was no longer the anchor. She was a daughter who didn't know whether her mother was alive or dead. She stepped away from every professional obligation, including a planned role co-hosting the 2026 Winter Olympics opening ceremonies, to focus entirely on finding Nancy. On February 4th, she appeared alongside her siblings Annie and Cameron in their first public video, speaking directly to whoever had taken their mother. "We need to know without a doubt that she is alive and that you have her. We want to hear from you. We are ready to listen. Please reach out to us." Her voice barely holding. 3 days later, on February 7th, the three siblings stood holding hands in a second video that appeared to respond directly to the ransom demands. "We received your message and we understand. We beg you now to return our mother to us. This is very valuable to us, and we will pay." But here is where it gets strange and devastating. The statement on February 24th was different from anything that had come before it. Savannah announced a $1 million family reward and then said publicly for the first time what everyone had been quietly fearing. "Every hour and minute and second and every long night has been agony. We still believe in a miracle. We still believe she can come home. We also know she may be lost. She may already be gone. She may have gone home to the Lord she loves, dancing in heaven with her mom and dad." Simultaneously, the family donated $500,000 to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Annie Guthrie, throughout all of it, took a different path. She appeared in the family videos but never served as the primary spokesperson. She made no statements addressing the suspicion aimed at her husband. Her silence was read a dozen different ways: legal strategy, family loyalty, or simply the impossibility of defending your spouse in public while privately not knowing if your mother is still breathing. On March 2nd, day 30, Savannah, Annie, and Tommaso walked arm in arm to the growing tribute of yellow flowers outside Nancy's home. Audible sobbing was captured on camera. They left a handwritten note: "Mama, we miss you so much. Our hearts are broken. We are standing on ash, on scorched earth. But Mom, though we are surrounded by so much darkness and uncertainty, our love burns bright. We love you, Mommy, our best friend." President Donald Trump personally called Savannah on February 4th following an NBC interview, offering federal resources. Savannah later posted that the $1 million reward could be paid entirely in cash and that tips could remain completely anonymous. The family had done everything in their power. They had begged publicly. They had offered a fortune. They had let their grief become a national event. And still, 54 days later, the most important question remains exactly where it started. That final phone call. The one FBI analysts zeroed in on, the one that led back to a specific name, a specific timeline, a specific 4-hour gap that nobody has been able to account for. The details of what that call contained, who made it, what was said, and what happened in the hours that followed are still at the center of everything investigators are working toward. Nancy Guthrie's phone is in evidence. Her pacemaker data is in evidence. The phone record is in evidence. The glove DNA is in a Florida lab. The masked figure in the Walmart backpack is still unidentified. And Nancy Guthrie has not come home. 54 days, and still no answers. You just watched this entire case laid out from the inside. Now tell us, after everything you've heard, after every detail the call unlocked, Do you think investigators are closing in, or is something in this timeline still being missed? Drop your answer in the comments. We read every single one.